English learners. Welcome back to English Pod. My name is Sophia.
And I'm Mason.
And today, we're going to be talking about a very, very special topic.
That's right. This topic was actually suggested by one of our listeners.
Exactly. So keep those comments coming because we want to create lessons that you need and that you want.
Exactly.
So, what are we talking about today?
Well, today's topic is something we all think about at some point in our lives. It's all about how we see the world. Are you more of an optimist, someone who sees the good in everything? Or are you more of a pessimist, someone who sees the challenges and difficulties?
Ooh, I like this topic already. Optimists versus pessimists. It's such a big part of how we live our lives and how we react to things every day. You know, when something happens like, let's say, you lose your job, how you feel about it might depend on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist.
Exactly. The optimist might think, oh, this is my chance to find a better job. While the pessimist might feel, this is the worst thing that could happen. I'll never find another job.
Right, and the way we think really affects our mood, our energy, and even the decisions we make, doesn't it?
It really does. If you're an optimist, you tend to feel more positive and hopeful, and that can give you the energy to keep going, even when things are tough. But if you're a pessimist, it can feel like every little thing is a huge problem, and it can make you feel stuck, right?
Yes, and that's why it's so important to understand how we look at the world. Being aware of it can help us change the way we think, or at least understand why we react the way we do. So, let's start with the basics. What exactly is an optimist?
Good question. An optimist is someone who tends to look at the bright side of life. They expect good things to happen and believe that everything will work out in the end.
Right. They might say things like, everything happens for a reason, or things will get better. Even when things go wrong, they keep a positive attitude. Like, this is just a small bump in the road.
Yeah, exactly. Optimists believe that problems are just temporary, and they focus on solutions, not the problems themselves. It's like they're always searching for the silver lining in every cloud.
Oh, I love that. The silver lining. That's a good phrase, learners. The silver lining is when you find something good even in a bad situation.
Right. So, let's talk about the opposite of that. What is a pessimist?
A pessimist is someone who tends to focus on the negative side of things. They expect bad things to happen, and they often think about what could go wrong instead of what could go right.
Yeah, they might say things like, why bother trying? It won't work, or bad things always happen to me. Even if something goes well, they might worry about when it's going to go wrong.
Exactly. Pessimists often believe that problems are permanent, and they sometimes feel like they can't do anything to change their situation. It's like they're always waiting for the next disaster to happen.
That sounds pretty tough. And you know, it's not just about being happy or sad all the time. Being an optimist or a pessimist can affect every part of your life, your relationships, your work, even your health.
Oh, definitely. Studies have shown that optimists tend to live longer and have fewer health problems. It's because they handle stress better. When something stressful happens, they see it as a challenge to overcome, not as a disaster.
Exactly. But if you're a pessimist, stress can feel overwhelming. You might feel like things are out of your control, and that can really affect your mental and physical health.
So true. And I think it's important to mention that nobody is just an optimist or just a pessimist all the time. We all have a little bit of both inside us, don't you think?
Yes, that's a really good point. Even optimists can have bad days, and even pessimists can have moments of hope. It's more about what you tend to do most of the time.
Exactly. It's about your general outlook on life. But here's something interesting. Did you know that optimism and pessimism are also something we can learn?
Yes, that's so fascinating. We're not just born optimistic or pessimistic. Our experiences, the people around us, and even the way we talk to ourselves can change the way we see the world.
Right. And that means if you're more of a pessimist, you can actually train yourself to be more optimistic.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing those negative thoughts and trying to shift them into more positive ones. It takes practice, but it's totally possible.
And we're going to talk about some tips and tricks for doing that later in the podcast. But for now, I think we've covered a good amount about what optimism and pessimism are.
Yes, I think so too. Now, I want to dive into what makes people lean towards one way or the other. Is it their upbringing? Or maybe life experiences?
That's a really interesting question. Mason, what makes someone more of an optimist or a pessimist? Is it their upbringing, their experiences, or maybe even something else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do we learn it from our families, or is it something that just happens to us based on what we go through in life?
Well, research actually suggests that it's a combination of both. Some of it can come from the way we're raised. For example, if you grew up in a family where your parents were always positive, always encouraging you, you might naturally become more optimistic.
That makes sense. Like, if you hear your parents saying things like, "Don't worry, everything will be okay," you start to believe that.
Exactly. But it's not just family. Our experiences play a huge role too. Let's say you've faced a lot of challenges in life, things like losing a job, failing a test, or having a tough relationship. How you react to those situations can shape whether you become more of an optimist or a pessimist.
Right. If you've had a lot of difficult experiences, it might be easy to start seeing the world in a more negative way, thinking that bad things are always going to happen.
Yes, and on the flip side, if you've had mostly positive experiences, you might naturally lean towards optimism, expecting good things to happen because that's what you're used to.
But here's something interesting: people who've had tough experiences can still be optimists, right? It's not just about what happens to you.
Exactly. It's all about how you choose to see those experiences. Some people might go through really hard times but still believe that things will get better. They look at those challenges and think, this is tough, but I can learn from this, or this won't last forever.
That's such a powerful mindset. It's like, even though they're going through something difficult, they still have hope.
Yes, and that's one of the main differences between optimists and pessimists. Optimists believe that challenges are temporary and that they can find a way to overcome them. They have that hope, even in hard times.
And pessimists, on the other hand, might feel like those challenges are permanent, like they'll never go away.
Exactly. It's almost like they see the world through a darker lens, where every problem feels like it's going to last forever.
But here's the thing: our brains are actually wired to protect us, right? So sometimes being a little pessimistic can help us prepare for problems. It's not always a bad thing to think about what could go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Mason. Being too optimistic all the time can sometimes mean we don't prepare for difficulties. Like if you think, oh, everything will always be perfect, you might not make a plan for when things go wrong.
Exactly. A little bit of caution, or even some pessimism, can help us be more careful and think ahead. It's all about balance, isn't it?
Yes, it's really about finding that balance between optimism and pessimism. You want to be hopeful and positive, but also realistic.
So, is it possible to train yourself to be more optimistic if you tend to be a pessimist?
Definitely, and it's not as hard as you might think. It all starts with becoming aware of your thoughts. When you catch yourself thinking negatively, try to reframe it. Instead of thinking, this is terrible and it will never get better, try to shift it to, this is hard, but it won't last forever.
That sounds like a great first step. It's about retraining your brain to see the good, even in tough situations.
Exactly. And another tip is to practice gratitude. When you take time to focus on what's going well in your life, it can help you shift from a negative mindset to a more positive one.
I love that. Even in difficult times, there are always small things we can be grateful for, like good friends, a sunny day, or even just having a meal.
Right. And the more you practice noticing those little things, the easier it becomes to have a more optimistic outlook.
It's like building a muscle, isn't it? The more you practice optimism, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And the more you recognize those positive thoughts, the more natural it feels to be optimistic.
That's really encouraging. So, even if you're naturally more of a pessimist, there's hope that you can become more optimistic with practice.
Yes, it's all about small, daily changes in the way we think. And remember, like we said before, nobody is always optimistic or always pessimistic. We all have moments of both.
Right. So, it's okay to have bad days or negative thoughts. What matters is that we don't get stuck there.
Exactly. It's about noticing those negative thoughts and gently trying to turn them around.
Yeah, turning those negative thoughts around, that's key, isn't it? It's not about ignoring the tough stuff, but finding a way to manage it without letting it take over.
Exactly. We can't avoid problems, but we can control how we react to them.
That makes me think of something. You know how some people seem to stay calm, even when things are really tough. It's like they've mastered that balance between optimism and realism. They acknowledge the problem, but don't let it bring them down.
Yes, those people are often described as having a growth mindset. They see challenges as opportunities to learn and grow, instead of just problems that are going to ruin everything.
I love that idea, a growth mindset. It sounds so positive and proactive. So, how can someone develop a growth mindset if they've been stuck in a more pessimistic way of thinking?
It starts with the way we talk to ourselves. If you hear that little voice in your head saying, "I can't do this," or "This will never work out," try replacing it with, "This is hard, but I can learn," or "I can figure this out, even if it takes time."
That's such good advice. It's like you're training your brain to look for solutions instead of just focusing on the problem.
Exactly. And it's also about giving yourself permission to make mistakes. A lot of pessimism comes from the fear of failure. But when you tell yourself it's okay to fail, that it's part of the process, you start to see challenges as less scary.
So, failure becomes a stepping stone instead of a wall, right? You learn from it and move forward.
Yes, and that's what optimists do really well. They don't see failure as the end of the road, they see it as part of the journey.
That's really inspiring, and I guess the same goes for smaller setbacks, too, not just big failures. Like, if your day isn't going well, instead of thinking, "This whole day is ruined," you can tell yourself, "This part of the day was tough, but it's not over yet." There's still time to turn things around.
Exactly. It's about realizing that one bad moment doesn't have to define the entire day. Optimists are really good at separating those moments and not letting them take over everything.
And that can be so helpful, especially when you're learning something new like learning English. It's easy to get frustrated if you don't understand a word or make a mistake. But if you think, "This is just one small part of my learning journey," it helps you stay motivated.
Yes, learning a language or any new skill is full of ups and downs. But if you can stay positive and remember that each mistake is a step forward, you'll get better with time.
That's such an important message for anyone learning English, or really anything. Progress doesn't happen all at once. It's those small, daily steps that matter.
Absolutely. And staying optimistic helps you stay on that path even when things get tough.
So, what do you think? Sophia, can a pessimist become an optimist?
I think they can with practice and awareness. It's all about changing how we see the world and how we talk to ourselves. It might not happen overnight, but over time, anyone can shift toward a more optimistic outlook.
And like we said before, it's okay to have moments of pessimism. Everyone does. It's about not getting stuck there, right?
Exactly. It's about being kind to yourself, recognizing those negative thoughts, and then trying to move forward in a more positive direction.
I really like that. So, even on tough days, we can remind ourselves that we're learning, growing, and moving forward, step by step.
Yes, and when we practice optimism, we're not just improving our own lives, we're also making things better for the people around us. Optimism can be contagious.
That's such a great point. When you're positive, it can really affect the people around you. It lifts them up, too.
Exactly. So, not only are we helping ourselves by being more optimistic, but we're also creating a better environment for everyone we interact with.
It's like a ripple effect. One small positive thought can lead to a big change, both in your own life and in the lives of others.
Absolutely, optimism isn't just about seeing the bright side. It's about spreading that light to others.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It shows how important it is to stay positive, not just for ourselves, but for the people we care about.
Exactly. And when we lift each other up, we create a more supportive, hopeful world.
And that's something we could all use a little more of, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. We could all use more hope, more support, and more positivity in our lives. And like we've been saying, that's what optimism is all about, lifting ourselves and others up.
Right, it's about building each other up, even in the smallest ways. You know, just a kind word or a positive comment can really change someone's day.
Yes, it's amazing how something as simple as saying, "You're doing great," or "Keep going, you've got this," can really make a difference. It's like giving someone that extra boost of confidence they need.
And I think that ties into why being optimistic isn't just a personal thing. It's something that can impact a whole community or group of people. When we're optimistic, we create a positive environment for others too.
Exactly. It's almost like creating a circle of positivity, right? When we're hopeful and supportive, the people around us feel that energy, and they start to be more positive too.
It's like how laughter can be contagious. You laugh, and then everyone else starts laughing with you. Optimism works in the same way.
Yes, and that's why it's so important to surround ourselves with people who lift us up, who encourage us to see the bright side, even when things are tough.
That's true. The people we spend time with can really influence how we see the world. If we're around positive, optimistic people, we're more likely to adopt that mindset ourselves.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if we're constantly around negativity, it can pull us down. That's why it's so important to be mindful of the energy we surround ourselves with.
Right. So, it's not just about being optimistic for ourselves, but also creating a positive environment for others.
Yes, and it's also important to remember that being optimistic doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect. It's about facing challenges with hope and believing that things can improve.
That's a really important point. Sometimes people think optimism means just smiling through everything, but it's really more about having a mindset that looks for solutions and believes in better outcomes.
Exactly. It's okay to acknowledge when things are difficult, but optimism gives us the strength to say, "I can get through this." It's about resilience and finding the silver lining, even in hard times.
Yeah, it's about hope and perseverance, even when things don't seem to be going well. And I think that's where the real strength of an optimist comes from.
Absolutely, optimists don't give up easily. They keep pushing forward, even when things seem impossible, because they believe things can get better.
And that's such an important lesson, especially for anyone who's learning something new, like learning English. There will be hard days, right? Days when you feel like you're not improving or when you make a lot of mistakes.
Yes, those days will definitely come. But if you can keep a positive attitude and remember that every mistake is just another step toward getting better, you'll keep moving forward.
Exactly. It's about seeing those mistakes as part of the process. Every mistake you make is actually a lesson, and it brings you one step closer to success.
That's such a great way to look at it, Mason. And for all of our listeners learning English, remember this. Every time you practice, every time you speak or write, you're getting better. Even if it doesn't feel like it right now, you're making progress.
Yes, learning a language takes time, but with persistence and a positive mindset, you'll get there. And the great thing is, you don't have to do it alone. There's a whole community of people who are on this journey with you.
Exactly. And being part of a supportive community can really help keep you motivated. Whether it's your classmates, friends, or even people online, having others to share your experiences with can make the journey so much easier.
That's right. So, even when you're feeling discouraged or stuck, remember that you're not alone. There are people who believe in you and who want to see you succeed.
Yes, and we believe in you, too, no matter where you are in your English learning journey. You're doing great just by showing up and practicing.
Absolutely. Just by listening to this podcast, you're making progress. Every bit of effort counts, and it all adds up over time.
Exactly. So, whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, remember that you have the power to choose how you see your journey. You can focus on the challenges, or you can focus on the progress you're making.
And choosing to focus on progress, even the smallest bits, can help you stay motivated and keep pushing forward, no matter how tough things get.
Yes, it's all about shifting your perspective and finding the good in every step, even if it's a small one.
And just like we talked about earlier, practicing optimism can actually help you build that resilience you need to keep going, especially when things get tough.
Exactly. The more you practice being optimistic, the stronger that mindset becomes. It's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the more natural it feels.
And eventually, it becomes second nature. You start to see the good without even thinking about it.
Yes, and that's when you realize that optimism isn't just a choice, it's a habit. A habit that can change the way you see the world and the way you handle challenges.
Exactly, Sophia. Optimism really does become a habit when we practice it enough. And once we've built that habit, we start seeing things differently. It's like you're training your mind to always look for the good.
That's right, Mason. And it's amazing how that shift can make even the hardest challenges seem a little easier to handle. You start to believe that no matter how tough something is, you can get through it.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons we can take from optimists. They don't ignore the challenges, but they face them with the belief that they'll find a way through.
Yes, it's that belief, that hope, that things will improve that makes all the difference. It gives you the energy to keep going, even when the road gets bumpy.
And you know what? It's not just about facing personal challenges. It's also about how we interact with others, right? An optimistic person can lift the spirits of those around them just by sharing that hopeful outlook.
Exactly, optimism is so contagious. When you see someone else staying positive, even in tough situations, it makes you feel like you can do it too. It's like they're leading by example.
Yes, and that's why it's important to be that optimistic person for others. You never know who might need a little bit of hope or encouragement to get through their day.
Absolutely. And sometimes, just being there with a positive attitude can be enough to make a big difference. You don't always have to say much, just your presence and energy can uplift someone.
That's so true. It's like when you're with someone who's always complaining. It brings you down, but if you're around someone who's positive and hopeful, it lifts you up without them even trying.
Exactly. It's like we said earlier, optimism spreads. And that's why it's so important to nurture it in ourselves, so we can also pass it on to others.
Yes, and when we think about learning English or any new skill, having that positive mindset can make the process so much smoother.
Definitely. It's easy to get discouraged when you're learning something new. But if you keep that optimism, if you remind yourself that every step forward is progress, it keeps you motivated to continue.
And that's what we want all our listeners to remember. Whether you're an optimist or a pessimist by nature, you can always work on building that habit of positivity. It can transform not just how you approach learning, but how you approach life.
Yes, we're all capable of choosing how we see the world, and that choice can make all the difference in how we experience it. So, if you can, choose hope. Choose to believe that things can and will get better.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, being an optimist isn't just about expecting good things to happen, it's about believing in your own ability to handle whatever comes your way, good or bad.
That's such a powerful way to think about it, Mason, and I think that's the message we want to leave our listeners with. Whether you're naturally optimistic or more of a pessimist, You have the power to shape how you respond to the world around you.
Yes, and we hope that this conversation has given you some food for thought about how you can approach life, learning, and even challenges with a bit more optimism.
Absolutely. It's all about perspective and choice, and we believe in your ability to choose hope, to choose positivity, and to keep moving forward, no matter what.
And with that, we want to say a big thank you to all of you for joining us today.
Yes, it's been such a pleasure talking about this very, very special topic with you all. We hope it's inspired you to reflect on your own mindset and maybe even sparked some optimism in your day.
And remember, whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, we're all on this journey together. So keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly,
keep believing in yourself.
exactly. You're doing great, and we're so proud of you for taking the time to learn and grow with us.
Thank you for being here, and until next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.